Welcome to the Synergetic Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Bieber, and our mission is simple: to help young professionals maximize their influence and impact. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to Synergetic Culture. I'm your host, Adam Bieber. Today, we've got a special guest in the studio with us here with the O Agency in their incredible studio space. And I'm excited to have Jason Etheridge, the founder and president of Logic Speak, joining me today. Jason, welcome to Synergetic Culture.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah,
Excited
man.
to be here.
I'm excited too. This has been a long time coming. I think
We've talked about this for quite some time.
About a year. I asked you about a year ago if you would ever come on my podcast, and I finally wore you down enough.
Well, you offered to pay me enough to get me here.
That's right. Jason is as I mentioned, founder of a cybersecurity and IT services company that does fractional CIO and CTO work in the greater metro area. The company actually just turned 21, which is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations.
Crazy. Thank you so much.
And if you do any research on either one of us, you will see that I work at Logic Speak right now, which is has been such a fun experience for me. So we've got to have a lot of these conversations that I feel like every time we meet, I'm like, dude, we should have just recorded that. That would have been a good episode. So I'm really pumped to have you here. What I'd like to do is share a little bit about your story, because while you might not be the young professional that's trying to maximize their influence and impact in this stage of life, you were at one point.
Too much gray for that.
Yeah. You were at one point, and I just think it's a fascinating story whenever you meet someone that started a business in their younger career, early or mid 20s, for that business to still be sustained 21 years later is wild. You have almost owned the business longer than you were alive before the business, which is crazy. I don't know if that makes you feel good or old, but
both actually at the same time, which is odd.
So let's talk about that journey. So what led you to start your own company?
So I was working at a company that I'd worked at out of college. I got my degree in computer science and worked at a company that was phenomenal, that I learned a lot from. And in 2003, we were so successful that we got acquired.
Yeah,
which happens, I think, to a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I probably would still be at that company today had that not happened. So I'm actually kind of grateful.
Yeah.
But I had I always call it that I got my master's, in real world business at that company. And so after the acquisition with HP, it really became clear that my passion was small business and helping small businesses with IT and with technology, and because that's where I had grown up, essentially. So that's why we branched out, my partner at the time, Jared, and I, and started Logic Speak.
Yeah. So there's definitely the story that a lot of people have experienced in larger company comes and acquire smaller company. Things change, the culture shifts. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes people are flushed with a bunch of cash because of their involvement in that transition. But regardless, it does shake things up. I'm fascinated by the fact that it wasn't like, let's just go find the next best job. You saw the opportunity to start a company. Were you already kind of in that mindset of, I want to do my own thing, I want to start my own thing, before that acquisition, or even before you stepped off and kind of got ready to start?
So I always had the idea that I would take over the world, like any type A oldest child mentality would have. But
classic Georgia Tech grad.
Right, exactly. And when I hired my business partner, he actually worked with me at the company that we were at together, Extreme Logic. And he said, I will come work with you if within 5 years we talk about starting our own business. So it really was his impetus.
Wow.
His dad was an entrepreneur and he had grown up around entrepreneurship and that mentality. And so I thought at the time, it's just a flippant, like, sure, of course, we'll do that. Little did I know, that God had the plan, and that, a few years later, well, actually a year later, that acquisition would happen.
Wow.
And so that was the jump or the push that we needed. And so we spent 6 months thinking and dreaming about what this company would be, and we were off to the races.
It's one of those things where you're like, yeah, sure. Like, you make that promise, like, sure, if the stars align, we'll do it. And then all of the circumstances happen. You're like, well, I guess we got to do this.
Parts, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Tell me about the name Logic Speak. Did you guys come up with that from the beginning?
I always joke that it was the one name that we could agree on, when you start a business with a partner. But honestly, the name came from the desire for us to speak technology into terms or the language that business owners could understand.
Yeah.
We all know IT people who, have this mentality of just get out of the way and let me take care of it. And they talk in three-letter acronyms and really don't have the humility and the care that Jared and I wanted in a company that we started. So the idea of Logic Speak came from that concept.
I love it. It makes total sense. I think everyone at this point can empathize with an experience, whether it's on hold with tech support or, just someone that in your sphere of influence who it's like, I know we're speaking English, but you're saying things that just don't make sense to me. It's an entirely different language.
Right.
So that idea of an entrepreneur or a business owner that's not focused in IT tech doesn't necessarily know how to speak IT tech. And so instead of trying to train them to speak the way we speak, let's just go to them and speak in terms that they understand.
Yep.
Which is so powerful. It's actually a really smart sales tactic because then you are showing that prospect and that customer that you understand who they are, where they're coming from, what challenges they face, and can explain it in a way that they understand.
And it's interesting thinking back on it, that DNA really even still is at our company.
Yeah.
The idea of being proactive, of strategic roadmaps, at meeting customers and learning their industry and learning what really makes them successful.
Yep.
And creating that partnership around technology. It had its roots 21 years ago.
Yeah. I'd encourage everybody that's listening to this to follow Jason on LinkedIn. He's done a really good job over the last year in really getting some of the ideas and thought leadership out of his head and onto the screen for others to benefit from. It's had such a positive impact. And I'm grateful that I was part of the people that helped push you to do it, just because there's so much value that you bring. And I mean this truly. There are so many times where you'll say something and I'm like, man, I wish someone else heard that.
Yeah.
Like, it's just good stuff. I think we also have enough trust between us where it's safe for me to say you didn't start that way. You had to grow into it. And so let's kind of parallel your leadership growth journey along with the company's leadership growth journey. So like, what were some of the big early wins you guys experienced at Logic Speak? And then kind of what were you going through in your own leadership journey as you went along?
So interestingly, the company and my growth have a lot of parallels and, ups and downs together.
Sure.
I told somebody just recently that I cringe at the thought of my leadership abilities when we started the company because I always thought you either were a leader or you weren't. And there was no growth, no learning, leader, follower.
Sure.
And it took me longer than I would wish for to really lean into becoming what's on my LinkedIn profile today, a student of leadership. And I would, I want the last thing I learned to be right before they put me in the ground. That's kind of my belief about learning how to be a better leader and how to be more the best version of me that I can be. And that started through the journey of Logic Speak when I bought out my business partner and had to realize that now this company was mine 8 years in, and what did I want it to be?
Yeah. What were the early wins? What was happening? How did you guys grow and start to scale in the early days? Because I think maybe it'd be helpful for folks to understand a little bit about the evolution of our industry, because IT services started more as a if it breaks, we fix it, kind of the Geek Squad idea.
Yep.
And it's evolved. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we started like most IT service companies doing anything someone will pay us to do. So, hourly, essentially. And the more hours you devote to someone, the more profitable you are. And if you do a good job and keep them running, then there are less hours to bill for.
Yeah.
So there's an inequity there in that type of relationship. So over the course of our first 4 or 5 years together, Jared and I realized that we wanted the value to be in the services that we provided and the uptime that we delivered, and not in how many hours we could bill. So we converted to managed services, as many companies do in our space, which really just means that instead of billing you by the hour, it's on us to make sure that you are as highly available and productive and efficient as possible. And for that, you pay a fixed fee.
Yeah.
Which
it's advantageous.
aligns our interests.
It's advantageous. Exactly. It aligns the interest because then we're incentivized to solve problems quickly.
Right.
Because the longer it takes us to solve problems, the
more it costs.
less profitable that client becomes. But then it also gives the client the peace of mind that they're going to solve every problem that we throw at them.
Right.
So it's brilliant the way that has shifted. And then just as you kind of grew as a leader, you guys had to start making hires. You had to start growing out the bench and expanding the team. What were some of the early leadership lessons from going through that?
Early on, Jared had read this book that he told me I had to read. You just have to read this book. And it was called The E-Myth Revisited, which for a lot of your viewers and listeners may recognize that book. Michael Gerber wrote that book, and it's had several revisions since he originally wrote it. I think he's super old at this point. But we read that book, and we're so radically changed by the concept that it really fueled those next several years of growth and of how we viewed hiring people.
Wow.
If you read the book, ultimately you start a business because you're a doer, because you're good at something, which, most entrepreneurs,
sure,
that's their story.
Yep.
We were no different. And you get so good, you have a lot of wins, you get some more clients, and then ultimately you can't continue to do for all the people that want you to do. And so you decide, well, we need to hire someone.
Yep.
And that creates several challenges because now you've got multiple people trying to do the same thing without having gone through the process of creating process and standardization and organization.
Sure.
All the things that we talk about now.
Yeah.
So, we had some early successes, and then you always have some setbacks where all of a sudden Joey doesn't do it the same way that Bobby does it. And, those types of things. And that really forces you, I always call it a crisis of knowledge. Once you know something, you can never unknow it. And so going through E-Myth and learning how to systematize your business, how to create essentially a franchise model, such that everything, like in a McDonald's, you can walk into a McDonald's in France and have the exact same burger that you have in Atlanta. That's all due to the franchise model.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a really big lesson learned early on in our business.
Yeah, that's huge. What was it like going from a small company, then to large company that got acquired, then to owner? Mm-hmm. And doer of a lot of the execution, to having to transition from a more technical resource to like a leadership position. What was that like?
I would love to tell you it's super smooth and there were no problems at all. That's not the case for most of us.
Yeah.
Because no one really teaches you how to become a manager of people, how to it's like drive-by-wire, how to get things done without doing them yourself.
Yeah.
And especially in our industry with IT people who aren't naturally, natural-born communicators and leaders, that's a big hurdle to jump over.
Yeah.
And so it took us a while to really understand the role of a manager and how to instill values into your employees, how to motivate them, how to cast vision.
Yeah.
All those things were not self-evident at the beginning.
A lot of that came from developing the mission statement at Logic Speak.
Yep.
It's had 2 iterations, or an original and then one edit. Talk about the mission statement a little bit and kind of how that bleeds into that leadership philosophy.
So that actually came from the moment I bought out my business from Jared. I had to figure out what I wanted the company to be.
And who are we?
And who what is this thing that I bought? And our mission statement that we had created when we started the business, when you have to do a business plan, was just absolute garbage. We didn't have AI and ChatGPT back then.
ChatGPT didn't write it, but it was as cringeworthy.
It was at least as cringeworthy, with all the the big business words. That's right, business words. All the things. But it had no bearing on our business whatsoever. It went on a website that we never edited, and that's where it died. And when I started when I bought the business, I wanted the mission. I had started listening to Andy Stanley's leadership podcast and had recently listened to kind of the 1-sentence mission statement episode. And I took that to heart, and it took a while to get to the iteration of, or what became the first version. And it really started with my own personal mission. That's ultimately where the mission of the company came from, is that if I own this company, I want it to be a reflection of who I am.
So what is your 1-sentence mission statement?
So let me tell you my personal one first, and then I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
My personal mission, I think I was put on the planet to serve others. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
That's full stop. So the way that we say that at the company is to use our abilities and technology to have a positive impact on the lives of our clients, employees, and then we added community.
Yeah.
Because we really believe so much in getting involved in our backyard, in giving back to the community and networking and helping others to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, I've seen large corporations that build in all these employee perks for their employees. And one of the ones I've seen in large companies was this idea of getting volunteer time off, VTO. So in addition to your PTO, your paid time off, you can also take vacation days, but take days away from the office to serve. That is something I thought that only existed in large corporations, but you guys decided to make it a piece of the culture at LogicSpeak to kind of put your money where your mouth is when it comes to the community.
And that's really where that VTO time came from, is when we decided that our community was so important to us that it needed to be in the mission statement, that it needed an equal position or an equal spot there. That we, to your point, we wanted to encourage our employees to get out and get in the community and serve.
Wow.
And so that we started that. And interestingly, it's been hard to convince people that it's real.
Yeah.
Right. To look for those opportunities and to be, that they really can get time off to go help and serve in the community.
Yeah.
But the people who have leaned into that and taken it upon themselves to do that and us, encouraging that, we've had countless numbers of hours and events and things that we've served at, all because we started VTO.
Yep. One of the cool things, like examples I like to give people, because I initially joined the organization via consulting and then came on full time, that like I'm super plugged in at church. My church community is a huge part of my life and my family's life. And so this idea that like I can guilt-free take time to go serve at summer camp this summer with our high school students and not have to worry about, am I eating into PTO that I should have been reserving for family time later? Right. It's so freeing. It's so awesome. And so I love sharing that with people. I get the opportunity to share it with a lot of people that are like, what do y'all do? How does that work? But it's such a fun piece of the DNA of our organization that I love to share, because it really is special.
And we found that it is a way to really embed that into our culture, this idea of giving back to the community, so much so that we're going to pay you to go do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for tuning in here. I want to thank our sponsors, the O Agency and Wingman Payments, for supporting this podcast and believing in what we're doing here. One of the things you talk about, Jason, is the importance of being personal, vulnerable, present. I will say this, you are genuinely probably the most emotionally aware and just invested in your own development, both spiritually and emotionally, that I've ever had from a leader that I've worked under.
Wow.
So it's really remarkable. But I told you yesterday, like, it must be expensive to be you. And so how like, what got you on the journey to become vulnerable and like lead in such a unique way that's not common to the type A founder or CEO?
Yeah. So a couple of things, actually. One was reading. There's a book that actually is on your table, The Only Leaders Worth Following.
Yeah.
That was super
Tim
impactful.
Spiker, incredible book.
Unbelievable. If you haven't read that, read it.
Yep.
For your listeners. But so this idea that we have to be secure and settled, that we have to be emotionally healthy in order to show up well for those that we lead.
Yep.
That was so impactful to me. And to your point, about it being expensive, I am a huge believer in therapy and counseling.
Yeah.
Life is too short to do it alone, and to have things. I heard at church one day, ultimately carrying things, what we might call baggage, right, from one season to the next of your life without resolving it. All it does is bring harm or damage to the next season of your life. You're carrying that with you.
Yeah.
And so it's been a journey that I've been on for the last 10 years at trying to become the most secure and settled and emotionally healthy person I could be, not only for myself, for my employees, for our company, and for my family as well.
It's evident. It's evident that you put in the work. One of the things I admire, we've had these conversations off camera before, that there was almost a stigma that we had to break as men, as leaders of our family, as people in business, where we don't. It's okay to not have it all together. It's okay to need help. One of the things we say all the time is like pretty much anyone with a pulse could benefit from good therapy. I'll say good therapy because there's probably, there's good and bad to everything, but finding good quality, helpful therapy, counseling, those types of resources really do benefit. And as a member of your team, I get to sit on the side of watching you lead vulnerably, and I've seen you like step up and say like, hey, like I'll be the first to take responsibility for the fact that this happened this way, or I'm not going to be able to make that meeting because I have a counseling appointment, and so you're just normalizing the fact that it's okay to need these resources, and it's actually has helped make you into who you are, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, it's as we were going through that book together at our company, one of the exercises that you do is you essentially think about the leaders in your life that you admire the most.
Yeah.
And we've done that exercise together.
Yeah.
And one of the things that occurred to me the first time we went through it is that all the leaders that I admire were authentic. They brought their whole selves to a company or whatever they were leading.
Yep.
And so often I think that runs counter to what we think we should do as leaders, which is know everything, have it all buttoned up, never admit that you got something wrong.
Yeah.
Or that you're nervous or scared or shamed or any of those things that are real life experiences that your employees have every single day.
Yeah.
So by going first as a leader, that's one of those things that I believe is in going first. You normalize, as you mentioned, you normalize the conversation and normalize people asking for help.
Yep. It gives the freedom to ask for help. It normalizes the ability to admit wrongs. Obviously, you don't want to do the same thing over and over and over. You don't want to make the same mistake over and over and over again. So there might be some behavioral tweaking that has to happen. But it's okay to step into a conversation in a team meeting or in a one-on-one and say, I think I messed up here. And to have that freedom to do that and not be afraid of the consequences, but to know that you're going to be supported. You may be coached. It may be uncomfortable, but there's growth on the other side of that.
Right.
I think it's huge. And so I appreciate the fact that you've chased that. One of the people groups that I love to study is military operators, special forces, Navy SEALs. Probably 10 to 15 years ago, they started to like not just be the silent professionals. They started to tell people how they do what they do. And so like for a while there was this, from what I understand of the community, there was this like, you don't talk about what we do. You don't share anything. You don't talk about what you do. You're not going to be the one that shows up in a bar and is like, oh, I'm this guy. Like you're usually the quiet, reserved, silent professional. Now there's a ton of resources out there from folks like Jocko Willink and Sean Ryan and some of these other guys that were operators, Tim Kennedy, these guys that did the job and now they're sharing, oh, this is actually applicable to life. Like the skills that they taught us make sense for business, make sense for life. And Jocko's big one is extreme ownership. And so it's that whole idea of like, you've got to, even if you're the leader, be the first one to own the mistake, set that example. And a lot of the way that they measure trust and reliability and dependability is not necessarily on the skill set. It's more on the vulnerability and the willingness to take that extreme ownership. Simon Sinek did a really cool example I think you've seen where it talks about high skill versus high trust, and that 10 times out of 10, 1,000 times out of 1,000, they'll pick the less skilled but more trustworthy person than they will the high skilled, less trustworthy person.
We've learned that time and time again in the hiring process.
Yeah.
For sure.
When it comes to how you look at developing people, what is your style? What is your mindset? Like, what are you looking for in the way that you encourage and develop someone like me in your organization?
So I think one of the misconceptions about learning and skills development is that we focus on the technical work. we prioritize that over all else. How you do your job, the things that you do, the buttons that you push, right? The levers. But I actually think that historically we've missed an opportunity, and actually should focus more on developing the person, making the person a better person.
Sure.
And if you build better people, you'll have better employees.
Yeah.
And I think how that's shown up here at LogicSpeak, we now have a program called LDP, Leadership Development Program, where we identify people who have leadership capacity, leadership potential. Ideally, we'd have everyone go through it, but that we have a 9 to 10 month long conversation all around the principles of leadership that we've learned, the authenticity, the vulnerability, radical candor. A lot of these concepts show up. And it's just inviting people into the conversation. Obviously, they're not going to learn everything about being a leader there, but it really is an invitation to start the process of learning how to be a better leader.
It's powerful. It really is, to get the resources, to have the investment, because when you choose to do something like an LDP program, in our case, you're carving out time in the workday where we could be being productive and asking those players to show up and just be present, to do homework, to prepare for, and doesn't necessarily fit into their job description of their day to day, but it's going to significantly impact their day to day. I think it's awesome because I think more leaders need to realize it's worth it to make that investment in your people. When did you kind of shift from like employees just to execute to this is an opportunity to invest in people?
Well, we realized that the tried and true method of sending people to training about how to build better servers or how to do something in Azure, that continuing to push people into those types of trainings, we kept getting pushback and people didn't want to take the time or they didn't see the value in it. And so we're like pushing a rope uphill is the example that I've heard many times. Not that training doesn't have to happen in an organization. We all have to learn how to do our jobs better. Yeah. We've just learned it's more important to focus first on building the person. And so that, after beating our heads against the wall a bunch with subscriptions to training programs and expensive training resources that no one ever logged into, we decided to stop and refocus. And
That's awesome. That's awesome. I can see the benefit. I can see it. I love that I get to have an up close, tangible experience to glean from. So as the company has grown over the last 21 years, there's been kind of milestones and mile markers of growth and of scalability and to be a part of the 20-year anniversary last year and to see Jared, your business partner, come up and dedicate a speech to you and the company was amazing. And just to kind of see the legacy of former employees and current employees that were able to be a part of that. Talk about some of the highlights just in that.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
So the 20th anniversary, I wanted to be very special. I hope I'm not here for the 40th and, on a beach somewhere.
I was going to say in a good way.
In a good way, in all the good ways.
I need you.
But so I really felt like it was something that would never be back around. And I wanted to celebrate. And honestly, the event was about saying thank you. Yeah. To everyone who had been part of the journey. As you mentioned, whether that's former employees, my former business partner, who I still have a great relationship with, former clients were in the room, current clients, partners, friends of the company, anyone who I felt like had a hand in where we are today and what we've accomplished, so that we could just say thank you and have a night out and have a good time. And to your point, we got, there were people that said things that nearly brought me to tears and at times did. Yeah. But it was a very sweet event, which is a weird way to say it, but
yeah, no, but it really was.
Yeah,
it really was. It was a great tangible, representation of the effort and the hard work that you've put into building the organization to what it is today. It's a great story. I want to kind of introduce how we started to work together. Cause that was such a fun, serendipitous encounter.
Right.
So I've told the story, but not on the podcast, just that I was dreaming about what the next evolution of my career would look like. And I had this podcast. I had hopes and dreams of consulting and helping people build incredible cultures, helping people build incredible sales organizations or sales people, and had kind of just been dreaming about what that next stage would look like. And thankfully, our dear friend Ashley May, who works at LogicSpeak, is our chief of staff and really the glue that holds us all together. I say it all the time.
Absolutely.
I know from church, and she said, "Have you met Jason?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "I'm going to set you up for breakfast." And so I've told the story a lot. Like, that's kind of how things got started. And I shared my passions with you, and you took a chance on betting on me to be successful in helping LogicSpeak. But I'd love for you to just kind of share your perspective from your seat.
Sure. So, back to our industry, IT people are not historically great at sales. I always say I'm not a good salesperson. I'm a good relationship person. I can build relationship, but I certainly am limited in the amount of time I can devote to sales. And so we always felt like that puzzle piece was missing from the overall puzzle that was LogicSpeak. And it was one that was inhibiting our growth, frankly. And so we wanted to prioritize building a sales process and a sales model and a marketing plan that would really enable us to grow. That was our goal. We had no idea that we would meet you, and at the time worked at a partner or a vendor of ours, and so that was the last place we were probably looking to hire a salesperson from.
For sure.
But when Ashley mentioned you, she was raving about your vision and about the things that you guys had talked about, and that she really wanted me to meet you to learn more about sales and see what you were up to. And so you and I think we had breakfast first, and really just got to know each other, talked through our backgrounds and what we'd been working on and up to, and what our goals and hopes and dreams are, as you do.
For sure.
And I knew it was one of those moments where I walked away, got in my car, and I knew that you needed to work with us. That's only happened 2 or 3 times in my 21-year career.
Wow.
So when it happens, I pay attention. But I didn't know if you were ready yet in terms of,
transitioning,
blocking and tackling.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so Ashley and I talked about what you and I had talked about, and we knew we needed the help, whether or not you worked with us. And so what started as a paid consulting engagement, where you actually helped us build the model that you now deliver, really was just a paid job interview.
Yeah.
Which it's a good work if you can get it.
It is. It is so cool. Like when, in that process for me, I thought, wow, like this is amazing. This is serendipitous. God clearly is in this, and I'm going to just try to knock it out of the park for these folks. And my original plan was to help you guys hire a salesperson to execute. And towards the end of the engagement, there were a couple times that you were like, "Well, why don't you just come on over and do it?" And I was like, "Ah!" And I'd hang up the call and be like, "Is he serious?" And then
joking got increasingly more serious.
It did.
And pointed.
It did. Yeah. And even Ashley, I'm really good friends with Ashley's husband, and he'd be like, "Dude, if you keep doing a good job, they're going to try to hire you." And I was like, "Okay." I did not know that it was serious. And so just kind of knowing the backstory of, one, the confidence that you had, and just the trust that you had in your gut instinct, and then the willingness to pay someone to come on this longer extended interview journey to see how it would work was really awesome. And what that's transformed into is, we've kind of talked a little bit about this, is kind of distilling that process into a repeatable process that a business could go through, which is what I call the 90-day pipeline sprint, building out those systems and processes in the pipeline so you can effectively close deals faster. And it's been such a fun foundry to work in, where we've been able to build it, test it, and see the success of it.
And all credit. We have been very successful since you started, both last year and then hitting the ground running this year.
Thank you.
So yeah, we've been thrilled.
I appreciate that. I didn't ask you to say that, but I do really appreciate
You're welcome.
that. Yeah. Well, I do feel like last year was a lot of us building the engine and getting the car ready, and we have it on the track. Like
I always say making investments.
Yeah.
Last year was about making investments.
Yep.
And then we're headed great places.
We really are. I'm fired up. This is a great opportunity since we're talking about the fact that I work with Logic Speak. I also can help other businesses do what we did with you. Thank you for being the type of leader that is willing to empower me to go and do the things that I love, that I have passion in, and help others, knowing that the effect of that is that it's going to come back around and ultimately help our organization. I've had several people be like, well, do they know? And I'm like, yeah, like he's championing me, like he believes in me.
Yep.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that.
Well, it's part of my belief that everything that we have was entrusted to us, and the more we can be open-handed and help others with what we've learned, that helps us keep the right view of things, and to keep our hands open. And so I'm thrilled that you are doing that.
Yeah.
And like you said, ultimately we'll all benefit from elevating everyone else.
It's just that. It's going back to Tim Spiker's idea of being inwardly sound and others focused.
That's right.
Confident and secure enough in ourselves so that we can go and empower others and make it about other people winning. I love that. So I want to kind of wrap up and ask you a couple questions. One, it's fascinating that you started Logic Speak at the age of 27. There are still a lot of people figuring their lives out at 27. And not that you had it figured out at that time, but now fast forward 21 years, what is it that, if you could go back in time and tell young Jason, give yourself some advice, or what do you wish you had known at the time when you started?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I would tell myself. Definitely at the time that I was starting the company, investing in becoming a better leader earlier would have paid dividends.
Sure.
Right? It's never too late. I firmly believe that. But I do think the earlier that you learn those lessons, the more beneficial and the further you'll go.
Yeah.
And so if I were a young professional, I would soak up every bit of leadership knowledge. I would find leaders that I believed in who were aligned with me from a belief perspective.
Great.
And I would listen to everything they say.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily do it all because we're all on different paths, but just soaking up those concepts because they just are so invaluable.
Yeah. You've been that leader for me. Just the type of person that I, we think a lot alike personality wise. We get along really well, but just kind of watching, okay, 5 steps ahead, 10 steps ahead, a few years ahead. This is kind of the trajectory of life I want to be on. And what is he saying? What is he doing? And how can I implement that in my own life? And I think whether or not you have a leadership title, you can do that. Which is really what this podcast is driven to do, is to help young professionals maximize their influence and impact. And so when it comes to influence and impact, we've got young professionals that work at our company, but you also have this platform where you talk to a larger group of people, both business owners and young professionals. What advice would you have for those that maybe don't have the title yet, but want to maximize that influence?
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts, actually. One is get involved in the community. I love that. It is so valuable to meet and be known by the people in the community around you. It's nerve-wracking when you're first starting out, and especially if you're young and don't know anyone and you walk into a room of 75 people, all who seem like they have it all figured out. But the sooner that you can get involved in a community of people, the more that you will learn, the more you will be able to impact them, and the more they'll have an impact on you.
Yeah.
And it's this backyard concept that you and I have been talking about, and kind of, creating some language around that. We really want to invest in our backyard.
Yeah.
And even if we acquire a company in another state, in another city, that they have a backyard as well.
Yeah.
And our growth goals are around our involvement in the community and getting involved in our backyard, because then that way we will be known in that local market.
I love that. I really do.
It's that has made, I won't say all the difference, but our shift in that in the last 2 years has made a huge impact and a huge difference, I think.
It truly has, for the extent that I've been a part of the organization. And I think that what people can take from that is assess where is my backyard? What's the community that I can show up consistently to? We talk about this too. I would rather show up more consistently to fewer places and truly invest in the people that I'm going to see there, as opposed to hitting up every single networking event and trying to, be everywhere at once. No, let's create a strategy around that. And then let's show up consistently to a handful of places where we believe in the impact of serving that community.
Right.
And that the results can be, some of the byproduct is new sales, new opportunities, but the driving factor.
But that's not the goal.
I'm here for new sale. No, you go into it. I'm here to serve.
Yep.
I'm here to live our mission. And if we execute that and we live our core values, then we're going to be able to, who knows what doors God's going to open.
That's right.
Jason, this has been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much.
I really appreciate you sharing. It's been fun to know the story, but to actually bring you on the podcast and get to share it with our listeners is a treat. If like I said, if you want to follow Jason, you can look him up on LinkedIn. We'll tag it in the description so that you can click and connect with him. He's a great person to follow. We also kind of have an announcement that may already be public by the time this episode airs, but you wanted me to say it.
I do. Well, it's exciting. This is a trial run, right? We're doing a podcast together.
We're testing it out. And so within the Logic Speak organization, we've developed a studio. We've invested a lot in building another resource to connect with our community, really.
Yep.
And so we're going to be launching, or by the time people watch this, maybe we have already launched a podcast from Logic Speak, where I'm going to pick your brain even more, get real specific, get some tactical.
And I tease you. I tease you a lot about it, and I act like I'm, not excited about it, but I really am excited about our ability to expand our reach.
Yep.
And the things that we've learned, I don't want to just die with us. And I would love to be able to get those things out. Not that everything that we know is absolutely right, but that we can have an impact in the community. And by having a podcast, that's just one more way that we can reach more people.
Truly is. And it is a legacy that you get to leave. We've often talked about, what is the legacy we're leaving? Is it just monetary? Is it this brick and mortar office? Is it, what is that thing? But being able to transfer a lot of what you've learned, and hopefully some of the things that I've learned, into value to our clients, to our employees, and to our community, well, then we're executing the mission.
Absolutely.
So I love it. Thank you again so much, Jason.
Pleasure.
Really
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Guys, thanks for tuning in for another interview and another episode of Synergetic Culture. We're going to continue to come back and continue to bring you excellent content and hopefully help you maximize your influence and impact. I want to say thank you so much to Wingman Payments and the O Agency for their investment in this podcast so that we can continue to bring you excellent content and help you along your journey. God bless, and we'll see you guys next time.